Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Cobb, and I'm a project director with the American Probation and Parole Association, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this webinar session today on reentry in Alaska. Our presenters today are Kathleen McLaughlin, Director of the Partners Reentry Center in Alaska, and Morgan Jaco, the Reentry Coordinator for the Alaska Department of Corrections. I met these two ladies in November at the Bristol Bay Reentry Coalition meeting in Dillingham, Alaska, and was so impressed with the work that they are doing around providing critical services to individuals being released from a secure correctional facility. They are both very passionate about reentry, and I'm so excited to have them online today to talk about the work that they're doing. Next slide, please. This webinar is being presented today through grant funding from the Bureau of Justice Assistance. APPA would like to thank BJA for their continued support of APPA to provide training, technical assistance, and opportunities for peer-to-peer information sharing, such as today's webinar, to further the development and enhancement of community corrections programs in tribal jurisdictions. Before we begin, I'd like to go over just a couple of quick things. All participants will remain muted for today's discussion to avoid any feedback or background noise. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available for viewing on the APPA website within a few days. The PowerPoint will also be made available following the broadcast so that you will have access to all the valuable information and resources presented today, as well as contact information for the presenters. Also, we will be allowing time at the end of today's broadcast to answer questions from the audience. You can submit your questions anytime during the webinar via the question feature. If we are unable to answer all the questions during the live broadcast, we will forward the questions in the queue to the presenters to respond to you, but we will try to get to as many questions as we can. Also, should you have any technical difficulties during today's webinar presentation, including any problems hearing the presentation, you may also let us know through the chat or messaging feature. With that, I will turn it over to our presenters, Kathleen and Morgan.
Thank you, Kim. My name is Kathleen McLaughlin. I'm the director of the Partners Reentry Center, and with me is Morgan Jaco. We are really excited about being able to be part of this webinar. As Kim was saying, we are both very, very passionate about reentry and reducing recidivism in the state of Alaska. We have a lot of ground to cover. We have several slides, so we will be touching very lightly on some things. We're hoping that we can come to some very specific questions that people have after we do the PowerPoint presentation. One of the things that we are very excited about is there's a lot of people from Alaska that are part of this webinar today. And I think that that shows a real positive and optimistic energy for getting reentry in the various communities around Alaska, because that is our ultimate goal, is to have statewide reentry in the state of Alaska and to reduce recidivism. So Morgan, do you want to talk briefly about the overview and we'll get going?
Sure. Today we're just going to be discussing prisoner reentry in general. The question would come up maybe, why now? This isn't a new concept, but this is something that we are focusing on. The state of Alaska currently is experiencing a deficit of $3.6 billion. The Department of Corrections alone is losing about $9.6 million in funding, so we really need to look at cost-effective justice, what we are doing within our state. We have very high incarceration rates, high recidivism rates, and we just keep seeing people go in and out. And like Kathleen said, we are both very passionate, and we share that with the whole community, maybe not, but a lot of people within our community. And we're not doing this alone. We're representing a small facet of the reentry in Anchorage and in Alaska. So we do want to mention that there's a lot of people that we collaborate with daily. And that is one of the main ideas that we will be focusing on in this PowerPoint, is collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. We do not work in silos, and we are a team, and we just need to continue to do that together. So we're just going to review prisoner reentry, why it's necessary to focus on this. I really like to look at the idea of investing in it and not spending. It's an investment that we can all benefit from. And so we will continue on. So number one is, why should communities and corrections care about justice reinvestment and prisoner reentry? Like I stated a moment ago, we are experiencing a $9 million cut in Department of Corrections spending. And one of the main things that's going on in Alaska right now is during the legislative session last year, we had some big bills passed that are focusing on prisoner reentry and reducing recidivism rates. Senate Bill 64 created a new entity in Alaska, which was the Alaska Criminal Justice Commission. It overall evaluates and makes recommendations for improving criminal sentencing practices and criminal justice practices, which includes rehabilitation, restitution. So this is a new focus that is brought down by the legislators, and it helps us bring structure to the movement.
I think one of the exciting things is that even just last week, part of the legislation from last year caused the creation of the 2015 recidivism reduction plan. This was submitted to the legislature last week by Carmen Gutierrez, Jeff Jesse, and Commissioner Ron Taylor. The point, I think, is that we are now in a point where instead of looking at our budget as, or our deficit as a bad thing, this is the perfect opportunity to look at how can we contain and to reduce costs when it comes to the criminal justice system. And one of the things that we have found, and we'll get into more detail about this, is that it's a cost benefit to turn criminal justice reinvestment monies not into the prisons but outside into the community reentry programs. And anybody that's here from Alaska knows that we've got to become more community-based in order to have healthier reentrants and healthier methods of trying to get people reintroduced back into their society and their community after they have done time incarcerated. But the anti-recidivism or the recidivism reduction plan, I would strongly urge everyone to read it. I think it was very, very well done, and I think it encapsulates what we need to deal with in this coming couple of years. If anybody needs copies of this, please email either Morgan and I, and we can forward that on to you. The biggest key, though, that we have to remember is we are not alone. This is collaboration. When I first got involved in the reentry, there was a lot of concern about competing, and I want to reemphasize what Morgan said. Collaboration and being able to reach out and to refer people, regardless of what your program is the way that we have to bridge any kinds of gaps in services for people that are coming out of incarceration. Collaborating and referring is the only way that we can cost effectively do this. It is impossible for all of us to have our own simple programs and think that we're doing everything. We have to collaborate. Just briefly on the national statistics, you know, I'm always overwhelmed when I start looking at the fact that 1 in 4 adults has a criminal record. That's 25% of our U.S. population, adult population. This isn't just a small issue. This is a big one. I think one of the most embarrassing statistics that still holds today, as it did about a year ago when I started looking into this, is the United States has the worst incarceration rate in the entire world. And when we think about the fact that depending on which study you look at, it's either Iran or Russia that's number 2. This is a shameful statistic for such a sophisticated society. We have to do something about this. So the other piece that right now is cost containment. And when you look at the U.S. prison population as being a $1 trillion business, for-profit prisons and prison supportive services, we've got to do something about this. We cannot afford, as a society, to go forward with this kind of a price tag.
Mm-hmm. Looking more at a local level, we have the extremely high incarceration rates in Alaska. We have a recidivism rate of around 66%. I think we'll get into that at a later slide. It has been reduced slightly lately, which is a good thing. But the cost to incarcerate is just so huge. Currently, the Alaska Department of Corrections is going to be at full capacity by late 2016 if we continue at this growth rate, which is about 1.93% annually. So as you can tell, this is why Kathleen and I are very passionate about this subject. It's a no-brainer to us. Looking at these bullet points and these statistics we have here, we don't, it's why not help the individuals that will be part of our community and our personal lives. We're just advocating for a healthier individual so we can create a healthier community. It's a win-win situation. It's actually somewhat selfish in terms when you look at it. It's making our community better for us and for everyone else around.
So one of the things that all the models, and there are different reentry programs in the state of Alaska. The ones in Anchorage that have the highest participation are Partners Reentry Center, Alaska Native Justice Center, and New Life Development. And all three of our programs collaborate together, but the key is if we can do, it's called, in my view, it's called the three-legged stool. Get people stably housed, get them employed or have a purpose, and deal with the behavioral modification that needs to be done so that people can start recognizing that what got them into their bad and difficult challenges is partly due to the way that they are thinking. And so with that, if you start looking at the cost containment once again for getting somebody employed rather than stealing from you, get them housed rather than been homeless and using the Department of Corrections as their medical facility, and dealing with thinking errors through MRT or other behavioral modifications, those have been shown nationally as the ways of reducing recidivism and helping people get back on their feet.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that Kathleen is pointing to with this three-legged stool are the criminogenic needs of offenders, which those three address it. But the main four that people look at are the antisocial behavior, antisocial personality, antisocial cognition, and antisocial association. So these are main focal points that many correctional models go off of, and looking at the risk needs responsivity models that we'll further go into. This is just a quick snapshot of Alaska statistics right now. We have over 37,000 individuals in facilities alone. This was data taken from June of 2014, so as you could imagine, it is increasing. Currently, we have 13 facilities statewide, 13 field probation offices, 8 contract CRCs, and 15 regional and community jails, and that's the Department of Corrections. But we need to reach out and get the community involved in all of it, and in every section of prisoner reentry. So this is just a quick slide. We have reviewed problems faced by individuals transitioning in, but these are just barriers that exist in our state and in, I'm assuming, everyone else's states as well. And a lot of the issue is continued community judgment and us versus them attitude. It's what we want to look at is just helping them and become part of our community and not look at it as a one side to the other side. So this is a quick slide on the nonviolent and violent incarceration rates. This is really shocking to me because it just demonstrates a part of the issues with our incarceration rates today. Our sentencing is becoming longer. The sentencing is, we have more nonviolent people inside than violent at this rate. So it's the statistics have changed in the last decade.
You know, a couple years ago, retired Judge Jim Wanamaker made a comment, and what was amazing to me is he said something that I think the screen also reflects. What his comment was is we should be putting people in prison that scare us, not people that we're mad at. And if you really think about who is in prison and who is the face of the prisoner, especially in Alaska, and you look at the nonviolent versus the violent, there's something the community can do by looking at that pocket of the re-entrants and attempting to do something that will help them re-enter in a more positive way rather than to continue to be punished over and over and over again even after they've done their time. One of the things that the recidivism reduction plan recognizes is when a sentence is over for the individual who's re-entering, that isn't the end. That's just the beginning of the punishment that a lot of communities will give. when we get into some of the issues with, specifically with respect to the Alaska Natives, a lot of times Alaska Natives cannot go back to their village. They cannot go back to the area in which they had their challenges. And for us to look at it from a community base, that is a real key part. Support systems are one of the key ways to keep people getting back into a community in a healthy way.
So this is just a snapshot of the Alaska's inmate population. This is current. As you can see, we are expected to go past capacity in 2016 if we continue at the increased level that we're going at, which is 1.93%.
And the reality is that the cost of a new prison, the estimates have been $280 to $300 million. Right now, with the deficit that we have, that is not a real sexy idea for the legislature or for the governor. So this is the time that we as a community and as people in the reentry movement need to look at how do we want people to be welcomed back into our community. And I'm not saying forgive people for their bads, but what I'm saying is that we have to look at they're going to be there anyway. Do you want them to be homeless on the street? Or do you want them to be part of a productive piece of society? So the one question that Alaska is now starting to look at very seriously is, when does reentry start?
So in general, reentry starts upon entrance into the criminal justice system. The Alaska Department of Corrections addresses this in different ways. I'll just go ahead and read the mission statement for the DOC right now, which is Alaska Department of Corrections provides secure confinement, reformative programs, and a process of supervised community reintegration to enhance the safety of our communities. This right now we acknowledge that we can't do by ourselves, and that we do need a more integrated system, and we need the community to get involved. And that is happening at a rate, and we just need that to continue. Part of the DOC reentry process is a three-phase process. I'm assuming some of the states are using something very similar. It is the transitioning from prison to the community model, short for TPC, or TPC for short. There are three main phases: phase 1, getting ready; phase 2, going home; and phase 3 is staying home. So phase 1 is really important in terms of assessing the offender and measuring their risks and needs, and also looking at their strengths. What can we focus on that they are good at, and how can we maximize that? That becomes really important when you start looking at program referrals and movement within the facilities, trying to figure out how we can help them the most, and in the end, helping us. So phase 2, going home, the transitional phase, is something that we're really working on getting ready for release preparation. We're working on the communication between the institutions and the field offices, and also the community partners who are integrative and important for our system to work. This is something that we can acknowledge. It's, we have programs, and we need to continue figuring out what's best, what works, and we're looking at evidence-based programs. Mm-hmm. So part of the Alaska, this is not an exhaustive list, of course, we have many, but we do apprenticeship programs, parenting classes, vocational training, any substance abuse programs, DVIP, things to help with the risk and needs that have been identified.
So one of the realities, though, is we can look at all the programs that are listed here, and we can also look at all of the things that Department of Corrections and Reentry has done so far. We've got a ways to go. We have to acknowledge, I think, in any reentry program, is that we are always going to have to look at new and different, be more creative, and make sure that we just don't get stuck on one idea and just do that until the ends of the earth. We need to be continually creative. One of the things that I focus on at the center is, please tell me a better way to do anything. Mm-hmm. Because if you're open to new ideas, you can come up with new ways of making this a better and a more efficient process.
And we also focus on the fact that we need to ask for help. As you know, ask the person next to you. I ask Kathleen for help. We do collaborate daily, so it's part of reaching out and collaborating, not being in those silos. And just a point to touch on here is in 2014, only 2.9% of the DOC's budget went to reformative programming. So that's actually relatively small when we're looking at the overall budget.
So one of the things that I think is the beauty of the Partners Reentry Center, which was a collaboration of 3 nonprofits when it was created in August of 2013, so it's a very, very new program, is that instead of looking at it as a strategic model that was all figured out, it had a strategic form and a structure. But we were able to do something that I think is very, very wonderful, and that is start from the ground up. Start looking at the participant the moment that they walk in the door and see what we can do from a boots-on-the-ground perspective. Grassroots creations come out of a sense of need rather than a sense of intellectual analysis. And you need both. You need absolutely both. But one of the joys about this particular program that I have had is that we have had the freedom to see what works and also see what doesn't work, and to be able to give yourself permission to not only try to succeed and always want to succeed, but also to fail. One of the, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but one of the really cool things that we just did recently was we were having trouble getting some of our Native participants to get to their probation and parole appointments because they didn't know where the probation office was. So we were able to work with the Department of Labor to become a host site for a MAST employee, and a MAST employee is an individual over 55 who is paid by the Department of Labor through a federal grant to basically retool and learn how to work in a setting that they're not used to after they're 55 so that they can continue working up until whenever they feel they need to retire. We were able to take individuals who are Alaska Natives, put them into the MAST program, which is no cost to us. It's a free opportunity for us, and they were able to fill a need, which was to navigate individuals to and from specific appointments during the day so that they weren't missing things. They were able to go to the Social Security Office, the DMV, to the Alaska Native Justice Center, to their housing, to the soup kitchen. And a lot of individuals who didn't have any urban skills whatsoever had no way of being able to navigate through that. Some didn't even know how to take a bus. So we were able to be creative by doing one thing and looking at how do we help these people move forward. And now it's become a viable part of our program. And I love this part, it's free to us. That's the key.
Free is good. So Anchorage Reentry, what does that look like? To us, it's a team effort. It's a voluntary effort on everyone's part. It's not mandatory, and that's key, is that the participants in the programs and the people re-entering need to be active in their re-entry as well. We can't do it for them, but we will help and be there for them and walk them through the process. I know that there's a lot of people that are hesitant to say, oh, we should hold their hands, but in the end, if this helps us, I don't see any issue with it. So teamwork is really vital for us. We have in Anchorage and some other communities around coalitions, and the Anchorage Prisoner Reentry Coalition focuses on the offenders transitioning into the communities. We're really just focusing on reducing recidivism rates. As we've said before, it helps us all.
One of the things I just wanted to add is the significance of voluntary versus mandatory. We have a lot of people who are coming out of incarceration after many years, and there is a sense of entitlement that sometimes comes with them. They are used to getting what they want in a way of just asking for it and expecting that it's going to be delivered, rather than to have to respectfully participate in the process. We provide housing. but we provide housing voluntarily to somebody who's respectful of our program. We do not provide housing to people who come in and say, you owe me housing, you owe me a bus pass. Voluntary to me is one of the keys, because if someone feels that regardless of their behavior they're going to get what you're offering, that's never going to allow them to change their behavior or give them the opportunity to change their behavior. And so to me, in a lot of the models throughout the country, that distinction has not been as clear as it is at the Partners Reentry Center.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So this is what it looks like. One of the keys for us is when we want to be nondescript. We want to be in an area where people are releasing onto the streets. In Anchorage, people release from the Anchorage jail parking lot, which is about 3/4 of a mile away from the center. And so at the moment that they release, if we have been working with them while they have been in a pre-release status, and they know that they're supposed to come and see us, they can walk up the hill and they can come and see us the very day that they release, and we will house them that very night if they would be otherwise homeless. We like the idea that it is in walking distance of all the immediate services that many people need as soon as they get out. General assistance, Social Security, DMV, food, and transitional housing.
Mm-hmm. I should also add that it is close to the community residential centers here, which the PRC and other reentry programs help a lot of the participants in the halfway houses. And it's also close to the probation office, which is important.
One of the things that's really key to us, and I think the next slide will show, is that we are a program. We are not just, we'll give you a bunch of stuff. You have to be part of a program in order to make sure that you are respecting us and you're being part of our community. One of the rules we have here in the center is most people are asked, employees, volunteers, or anybody, don't dress like a bureaucrat. No offense to anybody who's in this webinar who's in the government. Just realized that's probably not the best thing to say. But we want to dress in a way that we are part of the same community as the people that walk in. We don't want there to be any distinction between any of us. Sometimes that's a real surprise. The other thing that we like to do is we have a couple rules here. Meet, greet, and seat within a minute. Make sure nobody's standing in line, nobody takes a number. Everybody is treated with respect and dignity as soon as they walk into the center. And I can't tell you how, from my experience, that one step, which is it's a no-cost event, but to be kind and respectful to people, sometimes they aren't used to that, and they don't know what to do with it. So we are short-term reentry. There are long-term case management and reentry programs in Anchorage that we heavily rely on, New Life Development and Anchorage Native Justice Center. But our goal is, statistics show, if we can keep people from getting on the street and being in a homeless position immediately upon incarceration, we have a higher likelihood of reducing recidivism. Mm-hmm. So the plan is real simple. Basically, as soon as you get out, if you would be otherwise homeless, we will house you that very, very night. You have 30 days of housing on us as long as you're compliant with our program. You participate in the programs that are within our program or with other reentry programs within the community, or other referrals. One of the things we see is a lot of people are coming out sicker. Some are coming with mental health issues. Some are coming with TBIs, traumatic brain injuries. There are services, and it's not us, that are the places in which they need to go, and we will immediately start referring people to those programs. The idea is get people going immediately upon release into a healthy atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. And one of the goals that we're working on is continuing to get the communication through of what these individuals need before their actual release. And if it comes down to where they don't have a place to live upon release, then they come here. of course, with the institutional probation officers and different education coordinators and people within the institutions, we are trying to work a solution of referring them to the proper areas before release, so it's more of a clear handoff and not there's no cracks to fall through. That's something that we're just continuing to work on. Communication is key.
And I think that the referral system is really, really important. I think that any program, no matter who you are, you cannot serve every individual that walks in. And one of the beauties, I think, of the reentry community in Anchorage particularly is people want to collaborate and they want to refer and they want to work together. The next screen that you're seeing right now, this is a simple snapshot of what our center looks like. We have the reception area. The doodad on the right is one of the things that I'm very excited about. Data is key to all of our survival. We have an individual who is our IT guy who created our database. And in doing so, we do real-time data intake. So from the moment somebody walks in, and you'll see this on the right screen, they can put their prisoner ID number or their name, why they're there, and that will immediately be captured into our database system. I can't overemphasize how important data has now become to us. And so that is, as soon as someone walks in the door, data is immediately taken, and until they leave that day, data is immediately taken.
And data is very important for funding purposes.
Right. So one of the things that we feel that we are good at is that we are able to get people a job within the first 30 days if they are capable and willing to work. It isn't they're going to be their career-ending job. It is going to be a job. The goal for that is two things. One, it gives people purpose, and two, it allows us to assess whether or not they're serious about changing the behaviors that may have caused them to have gone into incarceration in the first place. We are not a day reporting service. I know that's a model that is around the country. We are not that. We do like people to come in on a very, very consistent basis, but it is not a reporting service in the sense that, once again, we're voluntary, not mandatory. Mm-hmm. The other thing we're extraordinarily careful about is we aren't a hangout center. If you don't have a purpose when you're here, don't be here. If you're not looking for a job, being part of our workshops, doing orientation, doing an online parenting, doing money management, if you don't have a reason to be there, don't be there. We don't allow people to just hang out. In the halfway houses, we have a deal with the halfway houses. If one of your guys is here and doesn't have anything to do, he's so lucky he gets to go back, because we do not want this to ever be perceived as anything other than a healthy part of the community. We are still working on an application. This is an example of what somebody who is incarcerated right now would fill out in order to prepare themselves for release and to be housed and become part of our program the day that they're released. It's a two-pager, and then we also have a ROI that we also provide.
Which is very, very important.
Exactly. You might want to talk about that.
Yeah, and ROI is just extremely important for the ability to communicate and really actually talk about the individual and as an individual and their actual needs, and not in some general sense, because we are talking about a single person and helping that one individual. So it is important to get the ROI so you can share information. It's also important for the different reentry centers and different community members to understand what this person has gone through and what they have done. It's also, you know, it helps with safety, and just understanding the person that you are dealing with will help everyone in the end, including the individual getting the services.
One of the things that is key, and it goes back to the collaboration, is we have a case management meeting, that's what we call it, every Friday from 1 to 3. Included in that is anybody who touches any participant that we have. So it is landlords, it's case managers, it's Morgan and the Department of Corrections, it's halfway a house representatives, it's representatives from the other 2 reentry programs in Anchorage. And the key is really simple. The more we know about participants, the more we can assist them. Mm-hmm. It is amazing in that case management meeting how somebody from Alaska Native Justice Center may have somebody in their program that we are housing that Morgan and DOC is also wanting to make sure that they're moving in the right direction. And so instead of relying on participants to tell us what is going on in their world, we can also look at what the wraparound services have been for that individual. And there have been many times where instead of having someone go back inside, we've been able to call the respective programs and get somebody stabilized or get somebody put in the right direction in order to avoid them going back in.
And having these meetings helps brainstorm with different ideas of how you can help someone. Sometimes it's just a simple solution, and it's asking the people next to you, hey, have you been through this before? What did you do in this situation? Sometimes the answer is a lot more simple.
The key for the assistance is, this is just a list. We don't need to go through all of these, but the idea is we look at each participant and see what we can do the best we can do. And the collaboration between the programs, once again, is really important. Tomorrow, because we have a co-participant, Alaska Native Justice Center, their program manager and I are getting together to meet with an individual before their men's group because of issues that we are seeing are arising, but we know that there is a solution. And we know that the 3 of us, the participant and the 2 of us, will be able to at least give options to this individual in order to make sure that he stays stable. The one thing I love is that there is never a program we won't try. There isn't a process that we won't at least give it a whirl. So when you see the programs offered, that is always a work in progress. Yeah. Some things don't work, some things do. We've tried classes that haven't worked, and we've tried classes that do work. We started a peer-to-peer on Monday nights, and peer-to-peer was it came out of an idea that wellness court graduates wanted to do something to give back to the community. A lot of people were having trouble because of work coming to the center, and a lot of times had difficulty getting the bus over to other reentry programs. So we started Monday night peer-to-peer. It started out with 2 to 3 people. Now it's up to 25, and we're going to turn it into 2 separate groups. But the point is, it became an anchor for some individuals, because the more we have people voluntarily coming into any reentry program and staying in that program, the higher likelihood of success.
And also being part of something and getting involved just continues to help with everyone's accountability in the reentry process.
And just briefly, these the statistics, and we go back to the idea of keeping track. This is basically a breakout of what ethnicities and the type of individuals that we are serving. If you'll see the 2, and this is not surprising, is Caucasian or Alaska Native. I believe as of yesterday, 29% of our participants were Alaska Native. Mm-hmm. One of the keys that we talked about was housing assistance. If you're worried about where you're going to sleep at night, you're not going to be too worried. If that's all you're worried about, the other things that we think are important in society, like getting a job, holding a job, personal hygiene, are all going to go to the wayside until you deal with housing. So with our 30 days transitional housing, that gives us stable housing for that 30 days. But after that, what we are willing to do is people who stay within the program, we will pay for a part pay for a second month. If they can start saving what they can while we're paying for their rent, and they can come up with a security deposit, we will pay their first month's rent in a permanent place. These are just statistics that we did, I believe, at the end of January, and it shows that we have about 630 people that we have housed. And what's interesting about this, and is that a lot of these people, they had never been securely housed and had been homeless most of the time prior to entering our program because they didn't have any other options. Getting back to statistics, these current statistics were pulled on the January 31st from our database. Since we opened in mid-August, we have served 1,374 people. We have an average census of between 50 and 65 people a day, unique individuals. One of the challenges that we have, because it's cold, is we have people waiting when we open at 9 o'clock in the morning. A couple days ago, we had up to 35 people prior to 9:30 who came in. So even though we are small, we want to be welcoming, and we never have turned anybody away. And I should also point out, we've never turned anybody away for housing upon release, if they qualified and if they were respectful to our program. That housing piece is so important. And with respect to the cost savings, I think that that's one of the things that we really have to focus on at this point in Alaska because of the deficit. We ran some numbers because some homeless funds, they're called the HAP grants up here, have now been eliminated from the governor's budget. So they've been completely zeroed out. And these are for homeless housing. We were able to pull some numbers to show that the option for our participants is, if they're homeless, they can either go back into DOC custody and go to the jail or to incarcerated areas, halfway houses, or back into the institutions, or we can keep them out with transitional housing. Mm-hmm. The difference, the cost difference, was about $8,000 per person for a 60-day period. That's a huge amount of savings. If we don't have housing options for people that are coming out, a lot of times we hear, I'll just go back in because that's my only other option. I have no other support system. So when you look at the costs, I guess the only thing I want to point out here is we are able to do a couple of things because of really creative things. A, get a database that is responsive and has an immediate ability to get data out of it for whatever reason. And B, nobody has a bad idea around here. If it works, we will make it, we will keep using it. If it was a bad idea, well, it's never a bad idea, but if it's not one that has legs under it, we don't do it anymore. And to be able to stay creative is really, really the key.
So, you know, when we were talking about community outreach and collaboration with different people, we have discussed some key partners that we work with. We want to point out the Department of Labor. We continually work with them, whether out in the community or inside within our facilities. We do Success Inside and Out. They have vocational programs and different things to help. As we continue along, Kathleen and I, we do community outreach and re-entry walks, probably around once a month, that provide opportunities for people to actually understand the concept of what prisoner reentry actually looks like. I think there's people in the community that don't understand the issues surrounding it and actually don't think that it is important to them, or they don't understand how it affects them as an individual within the community. So we've been doing these reentry walks, and we've been getting a lot of positive feedback and a lot of different opportunities. I've come along just from the reentry walks and different collaborations, and we get donations from the different people, and so it's just individuals helping.
And also needing to change the community perception of re-entrants. There should never be a us versus them. There has to be a we're all part of the same community. And every time we can re-message that and restate that, it seems like more community people are getting involved. It's kind of interesting. I was speaking a couple of weeks ago at the university, and someone said, I didn't realize that people came out of incarceration in the winter and sometimes only had their summer outfit on that they were arrested in. So she went out to her car and she came back with 3 winter coats. She said, these are mine, you can have them. That was a moment that she just never had thought about it before, and it was a way for her to understand the humanity of working with people who are coming out of incarceration, and sometimes with nothing.
Mm-hmm. because they are us. Like Kathleen was saying, it's not an us versus them. It is us. This is you know, the faces of prisoners, they're all around.
One of the challenges I think that all states have, and we have here, is that we do have populations that we do not serve well in urban environments. Like I said earlier, there's 29% of our participants are Alaska Native. There's a pocket of Alaska Native re-entrants who have a big challenge when they come out of incarceration, especially if they had been in for a long period of time. And that is Native men between the ages of 40 and 70. Many don't have urban skills, but they are required to stay in Anchorage because of treatment requirements. They do not have a sense of soft skills, so they even the jobs that we might think would be very simple and available to them, they don't know certain ways of how to behave in urban life. Mm-hmm. And for us, this is a challenging opportunity because they should be respected when they re-enter, and we should be able to have programs that are strong and hardy programs. Alaska Native Justice Center does a phenomenal job with Alaska Natives as well as others for long-term case management. But the housing component is a real difficult one for us. After the first 30 days, remember, if you don't have a job, we aren't going to help you with another 30 days on a partial payment, and we're not going to be able to help you with permanent placement because we don't have that kind of funding. So we've had to be creative. So what we've done with the Alaska Native population is a couple things. First is I told you a little bit about the Native Navigator, which has been a huge benefit for us. We also, if anybody is close to retirement age, we're walking them down to Social Security and getting them signed up for Social Security benefits. We are making sure that they know how to take a bus to the other Cook Inlet Tribal Council. We're making sure that in their living arrangement that they have other Native Alaskans that are with them. South Central Foundation, which is a phenomenal organization in Alaska, has wellness circles. We don't have a personal bus, but we make sure that people go to those wellness circles on that Thursday night when they're available. It is really key, and if you can look from the statistic, these are just the statistics that Morgan has with regard to the Alaska Native re-entrant.
And I pulled up this screen because we're talking about part of the challenges, and when you look at this, 31.8% of the prison population is Alaska Native, but it's only 19% of Alaska Natives in Alaska. So the population is overrepresented in our incarceration rates. And that is challenging, and just as Kathleen was saying, of how do we address this? What is culturally relevant programs? And there are different things within the institutions and different halfway houses that are culturally relevant, but we just need to expand on them.
It's a start. It's a start. The conversation has to keep going. And I think the beauty of Bristol Bay Native Corporation's reentry program and Alaska Native Justice Center and also the other up-and-coming reentry programs out in the Matsu Valley, we all have to be very clear that this is an under-supported population when it comes to housing particularly and post-release programs. Mm-hmm. And I think we've probably covered that. So the other key is that some of the programs that we and this is a mistake we made that we learned from. A lot of the programs that we were asking a lot of Alaska Natives to participate in were so not culturally relevant. It didn't resonate with them. Some people, for example, if they've come out after 20 years, they came from a village, they don't know how to use computers. And so we are having people do a orientation, and the key for us is get a job. Please get a job. We're going to hurry up and get you your starter job. How can you get a job if you don't know how to use a computer and to apply for jobs online? Because that's how a lot of jobs are now made available. Mm-hmm. So we had to start looking at that, and so we had people, Alaska Natives who were coming, and they were not willing to say, hey, I don't know how to use a computer. Instead, they would just silently sit there. There's two messages we could get. One, this person doesn't want to learn, or B, what are we doing wrong? So now we have individuals who actually sit with individuals who do not have any computer skills and help them do their first resume. Individual came and showed me his resume. He's 64 years old and he's never done a resume in his life. He was so proud because he finally saw on paper that he had done a lot of things in his life. But being able to tailor a program and and be aware of this person may not know or have the talents here.
And how can we take the talents that they do have from their village life and turn that into something that they can utilize here? Because everybody has skills that they can work with.
Absolutely. And one of the things we found is the number of creative artists that have come through our program and are still part of our program caused us to organize a First Friday event. So our First Friday in March is going to be a review of the artistic talents of re-entrants in one of the studios down in Anchorage. And it's not going to say this is re-entrants coming out of incarceration. It is going to be people having their art mixed in with other people within the community, because that's exactly what they are, is part of the community.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions that we had been asked before this webinar was, is there a difference between federal and state re-entrants? In the state of Alaska, we do not have a federal institution. So all people who are doing federal sentences fly out of Alaska. If people catch their cases in Alaska and in federal, a lot of people who re-enter because they come back from where they caught their case are from the lower 48. So some of the new the issues that we have to address is, for example, there was somebody who was flying between Japan and New York, got in trouble on an airplane. It landed in Alaska, and that's where he landed after he was released from a federal institution. Didn't know anybody here. So what we're finding is at the Partners Reentry Center is we have to work really closely with the federal POs, and we also have to be a little bit more creative on housing needs and also on the attitude. A lot of federal reentrants, they have a different mindset than some of the state reentrants, and having to deal with that has been an opportunity to expand our program with a little bit more of a behavioral modification or MRT requirement.
Mm-hmm. In part, just to touch on the federal side, at this point, from June 30th of 2014, we had around 121 federal prisoners. So it is part of the population and a unique population that we do have to focus on.
But as far as how they access our program, they are treated, state reentrants, federal reentrants are all treated the same. They're in the sense that they're all given the same opportunity for housing, employment services, behavioral modification, bus passes, or we call moneyed services. And the average cost per participant that we house for the period of time that our reentry program is working with them is approximately $1,100 to $1,200. Mm-hmm. So that is available on average if we house. If we don't house, it's about $392.
So how do we measure success? Tracking is definitely very important. As we stated before, a lot of the programs are evidence-based. And tracking is very important for funding and to apply for grants. And that's what a lot of applications want to know.
And so one of the things that when we first started the center, it was a bit of an experiment when it came to data. We didn't have a database. When this one was created, it took us a while to get our data integrity high. And now we know that it's high because it's real-time intake. Mm-hmm. We do all of our housing reconciliation, we do all our budgeting, we do everything out of this particular database. It is an access database, which helps because a lot of the evaluators of our program also have access databases or they are familiar with access, so they can ask us to pull information and reports on a real-time basis.
And the fidelity of the program is very important.
One of the keys that we have just started doing is we wanted to make sure that our what we do, does it make a difference or does it not? It is very easy for people to evaluate their own program. We didn't want to do that. So we took our data, we gave it blindly to the Department of Corrections. They added their information to it, and it went to the Alaska Judicial Council for a third-party evaluation. That is something that I'm really proud that we were able to do, because we don't want to be the ones that determine the success of our program. We want the data to speak for itself. Mm-hmm. Just some key outcomes that we put in here is on the data that we pulled, I guess, a week ago when we did this PowerPoint. We had 50 new hires in December of 2014. We have over 300, we actually have over 340 employers who are willing to hire our participants. We have over 60 landlords that are willing to rent. One of the things that people may not know how to do is budgeting. Mm-hmm. We have, and this is free. This is the thing. When you collaborate with people, you get free services. Money Management, Inc. has a grant from United Way, and they are able to take our participants, pull a credit report on them, and let them know how to deal with some of their credit issues. Mm-hmm. The key is you can see certain results, like you can see in this last part, where people were actually reducing their average debt within 6 months by virtue of having the knowledge about what their credit reports look like, and they were getting a job.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think a key point here would be that with the employers and the landlords, it shows a change in the way that they're thinking and accepting these people back into the community and how we want to work with them. So it is an outcome that isn't number driven, but it shows a change in the way that the community is taking back in these people.
Every program can do better. Every program is not perfect, and every program is going to have its strengths and weaknesses. One of the things that I love is when someone says to me, "I've got a better idea than the one that we're operating on now."
Perfect.
Except when it comes from Morgan, I never listen to it. But here's some issues that are really where we are not doing as well as we need to as a reentry program statewide.
Yes, and part of the huge challenge is wraparound services coming from incarceration out into the community, whether that's Social Security reinstatement, mental health is, right now the Department of Corrections is the largest mental health provider in the state. That is an issue, and we cannot continue to provide these services, especially with the budget cuts that we are facing. So wraparound services are very key. And we just want to continue to expand reentry services statewide because that will just help affect more people.
And I think with the mental health, one of the things that we were able to do is there are programs within Department of Corrections, APIC, for example. Mm-hmm. We collaborate with them on a regular basis. We will not turn somebody away who has mental health challenges that are so severe that they cannot be employed. We will at least house them for 30 days for a couple reasons. One is most people come out with 5 days worth of medication. That's not enough because sometimes they don't get a mental health evaluation for 5 to 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. If we advocate for them, we have been able to get additional people like the services at Anchorage Community Mental Health to do fast intakes, Alaska Neighborhood Health fast intakes in order to get people needed medical attention. Mm-hmm. If we are housing them during that 30 days, we can touch them more often. They're coming in at least every other day, and we're able to see if we can help get them stabilized. Second piece, we have some really good mental health services if people know where to go. And so we refer them immediately out to Access Alaska or any of the other mental health services that are able to work, especially with TBIs. Mm-hmm. TBIs are a huge issue right now. Go ahead.
And I was just going to back up. It comes along the same as that we can't do it alone. If the Partners Reentry Center can't assist that person, they're going to refer that person to someone that can.
And I think that the other piece that we are struggling with, but we are so excited because one of our senators, our Alaska senators, has gotten involved in this one. People have not been able to get Social Security reinstatement or Social Security benefits upon release. So they are unable to work. They are unable to find purpose usually for that first 30 days. They're worried about how they're going to pay their rent. So we have been starting to work with Senator Murkowski's office, in addition to the new Social Security managed regional directors in Alaska, because to wait 5 or 6 weeks in order to get a reinstatement does not do anything but cause somebody to be homeless. And we have to be in better communication with Social Security. We also need to, and I think Kimberly Martis and the Bristol Bay Reentry Program has been a great resource for us to help us find additional services for rural reentrants. We have been fortunate enough to get people transferred back to some of the rural communities, not a lot, but some, which is a sign that there are ways that statewide reentry services can work together and will.
So, and just to finish off the presentation, something that Kathleen and I were discussing about in terms of challenges, and I'm just going to take her quote, would be shifting the attitude from incarceration to incorporation. So they are part of our community and we continue to treat them like that. So this is our last slide. This is my favorite.
This is Morgan's slide.
It's my favorite story. I'm not sure if you guys know the starfish story. If not, I recommend you look it up. But really it's about making a difference one by one.
If anybody has any questions or you need any kind of specific information, we are, the Reentry Center is transparent. We will share anything we have with anyone at any time in order to help move the reentry discussion forward.
24 hours a day. No. So yes, please contact us with any questions. As she said, we are here to help, and we want to hear people's ideas. And if you can help us and come up with some suggestions of what to do differently, let's hear them.
Okay, thank you ladies for that presentation. We do have several questions, so before we move on to the resources part of the webinar, I wanted to make sure we get to everybody's questions, so I'm just going to toss them out here to you. The first question asks, how does the state sustain the Alaska Criminal Justice Commission and ensure their recommendations are followed through?
That's a good question.
That's a really good question.
It's mandated for 3 years through the legislator. What was the second follow-up? How those recommendations are still being processed out and brainstormed. We're in the very beginning of those stages right now.
But it is a 3-year process. One of the things that I think will help is there are documents now being prepared and have been prepared that are going to help guide that. One is the recidivism reduction plan that was written and prepared by Carmen Gutierrez, which is a 2015 plan, which does lay some pretty good groundwork. As far as how it will actually come to fruition after 3 years of planning, that's going to depend very, in a large part, on the politics, on the environment, on the willingness for people to look at changing the way that we not only we sentence, but we incarcerate and we reenter.
And we're also looking at ways that the local coalitions can help the Criminal Justice Commission in terms of bringing ideas, bringing things that we see as barriers. Sometimes the people on the ground can't help change, you know, the sentencing structure, but that's what this Criminal Justice Commission. So working together, it's more about collaboration.
But what we can say is this is how this sentencing structure is affecting our reentrants. That's the data and the boots on the ground grassroots information that we can provide.
Okay. The next question is, what is the relationship to the report that the Commission just received and the Alaska Prisoner Reentry Initiative?
What is the what?
The relationship to the report that the Commission just received and the Alaska Prisoner Reentry Initiative.
The report and the initiative, I think, go side by side in doing what we all are part of doing, which is to reduce the cost of incarceration. Now, as far as the technical connection between the two and how the various groups and the legislative components are dealing with it, I can't answer that question.
Yeah, what we can say is that part of the recidivism reduction plan, which just came out last week, so this is all, starting brand new and just getting the movement out. But that does incorporate the Alaska Prisoner Reentry Initiative and really looking at what we can do as community members and how we can get involved from the outside in. And I think that's what the Alaska Prisoner Reentry Initiative is really a strong point, is bringing the community members into the facilities and helping with those transition services, which will ultimately reduce recidivism. And that's part of the reduction plan that was just published.
And within the reduction plan, there's all the recidivism reduction plan. There are recommendations that are aligned with the initiative.
Okay. The next question is kind of a statement and a question. It says, there is a big difference between committing a nonviolent offense and a nonviolent offender. What is the risk level of persons who are incarcerated?
I can respond a little bit on that. I think this is more of Morgan's. The LSIRs, which are now going to be used very
Part of that legislative Senate 64 is that it is used for everyone that is sentenced 30 days or more.
And the LSIR is do you want to just talk briefly about what that is and how that will be used to measure somebody's ability to reoffend or how to re-enter?
Well, it's the risk needs assessment, and really it's a comprehensive assessment which looks at the criminogenic needs that we briefly touched on before. I'm not quite sure I understand the question between the nonviolent offender or the nonviolent offense and the nonviolent offender. Is that as when you look at the assessment, it looks at the current offense, but it also looks at the past history. So it is able to take in a full picture of the offender and not just what they were specifically in for currently. So it does look at the whole shebang and the person. And it helps with the whole holistic approach of really focusing on the person as a whole, because there's not just what they did that time, it's what they've done for years prior, and it looks at their entire history.
And just to interject, one of the things that I think is very interesting about what we see in a grassroots perspective is we start seeing trends like a lot of women who are coming out. Most are nonviolent. And you can there are certain ways that when you look at it from the practical boots on the ground way, from that vantage point, I should say, you find that most people are nonviolent offenders. Most, I should say most. Many women are nonviolent offenders who are doing nonviolent offenses.
Do you have any data that shows the risk level of individuals coming into your program? Are they mostly low-risk offenders, mostly medium risk, mostly high risk? Do you see any trends in that regard?
That's something that we are still working on, is collaborating and making sure that those numbers are given to the reentry centers. One thing that the LSIR is helping, and this is still a work in progress, so bear with us, but part of what the LSIR does is help us focus on the people that need the help the most. You don't want to, you want to maximize your resources, first of all, but it also shows, statistics show that if you try to overprogram someone that is a low risk, it's going to have a negative effect. So although the people that are walking into the reentry center are getting served because of a need, if they don't necessarily, if their risks aren't too high, or we're not trying to put resources to I don't want to say waste resources, but we definitely want to maximize the efforts in what we're doing, and you're going to get that on the different risk levels. And people that are low risk, moderate risk, it has been shown that that type of programs are not always the best thing, and that they can actually have a negative effect instead of a positive one.
But and maybe another answer to your question is our requirements are you have to be coming out within the last 6 months on a sentence that was involving a felony or a misdemeanor with an ASAP requirement, so it has some sort of treatment component. So we take anybody into the program regardless of if they're high risk or low risk. We take anybody in the program who is coming out on a felony or a misdemeanor with an ASAP requirement. And it is very discretionary on our part how much resources each will get, but we don't distinguish who we will serve based on their risk needs. We will serve everybody that fits that qualification.
Okay. The next question asks, what are your suggestions for collaboration around the state?
Well, I know currently the Reentry Center is working with the Mat-Su Coalition on expanding a reentry center, and that's something that I know I personally would like to see reentry centers, and I think a goal of a lot of people's is to get reentry centers where there are probation offices. And collaboration just continues to look like working with others, referring to different programs, and recognizing what we're all good at and who else can help.
One of the things that I firmly believe in is transparency and giving what you know away for free. Nobody should have secrets. Collaboration requires people to be transparent and to be able to say, we can do this, we can do that, here's our database structure. When we were talking to Mat-Su, because they're thinking about creating their own community reentry. And I want to emphasize, collaboration is different in my mind than just cookie-cuttering one idea and just putting it all over the place. Mm-hmm. Partners Reentry Center, in my mind, works in Anchorage, but it is not the model that should be just Xeroxed around the state. Every community has to own their own reentry center and deal with the specific needs mm-hmm. that community has. So there isn't any like just silver, gold-plated, just copy.
Like this, yeah.
But what there is that if we collaborate, and we've done this with the Mat-Su Coalition, whatever they want, they get. Anybody who wants anything from this center to start, to copy, to use as a baseline, use it. We should not feel any sense of ownership, because the bigger issue is statewide involvement in this conversation. My ideal situation would be when someone releases that they can have a treatment in Nome or Bethel or Barrow or Kotzebue, rather than spend a year or a year and a half in Anchorage waiting to get treatment done in a place where they don't want to be in the first place. Mm-hmm. So statewide collaboration requires continued conversation and sharing of information and product.
Great. The next question asks, how did Alaska bring in community partners? Not providers, but true community partners who come in and volunteer their own time, both individuals and businesses.
Oh, wow.
That's us blabbing about what we really care about all the time. You know, it's definitely just about outreach. And like mm-hmm. we had touched on the PowerPoint in the reentry walks, Kathleen does a lot of different discussions and talks within the community, and is involved in a lot.
You know what's really surprising is if you talk about reentry rather than pretend, what the attitude a lot of times when I'm talking is, well, we don't have any felons in our community. We don't have any criminals in our community. Or if we do, I don't see them because they are in a certain part of town rather than my part of town. When you change that philosophy in a community and say, yes, they're around you all the time, mm-hmm. and 1 in 4 adult individuals in the United States have a criminal record, they are part of your community, there is a shift in the way that people start thinking about it. Mm-hmm. It is amazing that we've started to get private donations. We are starting to get people who just come in and just drop stuff off, or just come in just to see what we're doing. But I think it's the transparency and the willingness to accept anybody who walks in the door, and also accept any gift that any individual is willing to give us, if it's clothing, appliances, if it's their willingness to just come and help somebody with a resume, but make it into a community activity.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a lot of community partners right now, and I hope our list keeps growing, because that's the way that a community should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to add, housing is a real big issue. There are a lot of programs around the country. I firmly believe that housing should not be in one big building for people who are reentering. I firmly believe that it has to be out in the community in all areas of town, because that is what community is diversity.
Mm-hmm. And it
and
really,
so
yeah, I was just going to say, it really is about the outreach and the, one by one, making one person aware, and then that other person. When I'm out to eat at a restaurant and I know that one of my furloughees is out there in the kitchen working, I like to bring it up, because we are helping them with their vocational skills. And people at first cringe and think, why did you just tell me that? But I instead think that people should be proud of the fact that they are around us and that we are working with them side by side.
And what we found is, especially people that start getting jobs and start coming here. One guy said to me a couple of weeks ago, he said, if you hadn't pushed me into thinking I could do this, I wouldn't have gotten this job on the slope. Mm-hmm. And when that person goes up on the slope, my comment to him was, you are an example of our program. You are an example of re-entrants. So you're not just going for you, you are going for our program. And when people understand that they are the face of a positive thing rather than a negative thing, it goes back to my comment, like breeds like. If you are good to someone, they will be good back to you. If you hang around positive people, they will be positive back to you. Those simple rules, I think, make this more of a community-involved thing rather than just an us versus them.
Great. The next question asks if you can talk more about what the Reentry Walks program is.
It's really fun. We basically meet at the Anchorage Jail parking lot, which is how you would be released from any institution in Alaska. You get bussed into the parking lot. And we meet at 8:30 in the morning. It's usually on a Friday. And we start off with the discussion with Morgan. We walk up the hill. We go to general assistance. We go to Anchorage Community Mental Health. We go to the center. We walk it, though. You have to walk it so you can really understand what it feels for your day of being released from incarceration. We go to where we house some of our people during the transition period. Sometimes we go to the PO's office. We have lunch at either the Soup Kitchen or Beans Cafe. We walk to Brother Francis, and we go to any place that a person who is homeless, who's coming out of incarceration, would go that first day. And it takes about 4.5 hours.
So it just really helps enlighten people that are just not privy to really what a day is like in a person re-entering. And, it's a struggle, and a lot of people don't understand that.
If anyone's interested in doing this, you just need to email me, and I'll tell you when the next one is, and we will do it. We did have a television person come with us on one, and there is a blib on that at KTVA Channel 11. If you just plug in re-entry, you'll see that.
Okay. The next question asks, how are the programs funded, and are programs evidence-based?
The answer is they're funded currently. Partners Reentry Center is funded by state funds at this point in time. We have a grant through DHSS. We're in the second year of what was going to be a 3-year funded grant. That is for $600,000. Half of that roughly goes into housing. And then we also received BHAP funds, which was $145,000 last year, and that was for homeless housing. That is currently been taken out of the governor's budget, so that's been zeroed out. So our programs are funded from that, initially that $600,000. Evidence-based, the answer is yes. We are always looking for additional evidence-based programs. Our online parenting programs are SAMHSA approved. Our MRT is SAMHSA approved. So yes, the programs that are that we are able to get in are evidence-based.
Okay, great. And just a follow-up comment from an audience member regarding the statewide collaboration and building partnerships. He says the Alaska Prisoner Reentry Initiative defines both the policy framework for a statewide initiative and the process for statewide collaboration, including state and local organizational structures. So again, that was the Alaska Prisoner Reentry Initiative, if you're looking for more information on statewide collaboration and building partnerships. That is all of the questions I believe that we have in the queue right now. So if anybody else has another question, go ahead and type that in. One question that that I had, Kathleen, is what options do you use for your housing options that allows you to guarantee housing for up to 30 days?
Our transitional, we call it transitional housing. What we do is we have operating agreements or arrangements with private landlords. We have 6 now who have various types of housing, and we will contract with them on a per-person basis. Mm-hmm. And we have yet to turn anyone away. And they're for men and for women. They are all different types. Mm-hmm. So some are bunk, some are shared rooms, some are individual rooms in homes. It's a wide variety. And basically what we do is we develop relationships with private landlords. I believe all of them are for-profit, and then we pay for those beds. And it's just a matter of outreach. And when someone says, "Hey, I've got a building here, and I'm thinking about renting," and I just have my hand up in the air in their face, going, "I've got a good idea for you," and it's just making sure that those relationships work. The one thing we do say is you can kick anybody out if they disrespect you or your facility.
And when we're talking about being creative, an example of that would be in the wintertime, we have a hostel here that just kind of reduces in population, and the PRC fills their beds. So it's just kind of looking at what can be done with what you have in front of you.
Okay. We've received 2 more questions. Do you place offenders released to transitional housing on GPS electronic monitoring assigned to the transitional housing?
No.
No.
They may be on electronic monitor as a condition of their... it's used as electronic monitoring is used in different ways in Alaska, but the reentry center would not place them on EM. They could be placed at a transitional housing on EM based off of a discretionary parole decision, or as a release housing option for EM. But as far as tracking, no, because that's not what we're here for. What we're here for is to allow that person an opportunity to healthfully move back into the community. Now, if there is an individual that people are concerned may have difficulty with stability, we work very closely with their probation officers and with Morgan as our reentry probation office, and we will communicate very aggressively on individuals if we feel that we need to have better sight. Sometimes if we feel that someone may have a challenge in the transition, we will pick a certain housing option for them that has a little bit more structure than one that has no structure at all, because we do have that flexibility.
Okay. And the last question asks, how broad of an expansion do you foresee in the locations based upon the dispersed population and the large geographical area that Alaska faces?
Expansion of the reentry center itself, or expansion of reentry services?
Maybe address both. He's not specific.
I mean, I'm not sure about the reentry center itself. Maybe Kathleen can speak for that. But in terms of reentry services in Alaska, that expansion is just as far as we can see. Well, we can't see a lot, but you know, we have the desire to expand as much as possible, because as many people as we can touch and as many individuals releasing that we can have an effect on, we want that. And I know that we can't do it alone, which is why we need to expand services elsewhere.
But I can say that one of the things, you know, if this was a perfect crystal ball and I could like say what should happen, I believe there's probably 10 to 12 options for where there are POs where you could have local re-entry services there. But one of the things that I think is really cool is we get calls from people from Juneau, Fairbanks, Kotzebue, Bethel, Barrow, and they'll say, my son is releasing, how can we coordinate services? And we will do it from Anchorage with people that we are connecting with in the rural areas. So it's the biggest question is, don't be afraid to collaborate. And so the expansion of reentry, we should be able to get people re-entering any part of the state, even if they don't have a re-entry center or program right there, because we know how to do it. And Anchorage Alaska Native Justice Center does too. And I mean, we have the capacity.
Yeah, well, and you know, a lot of it really is and I don't know if this is the grassroots approach, but really just picking up the phone and making a phone call to ask, okay, I have an individual that needs this, this, and this. How can you help me? And because it's, you know, it's about collaboration, but it's a simple thing as a phone call that really gets that ball rolling. And that's kind of a lot of how the Department of Corrections became more involved with this, with the reentry center and with different service providers, and is just, okay, let's work on this one case, and it's one by one, and it snowballs.
Okay, looks like that's the last question. So thank you, ladies, for addressing all of those questions and the great information that you shared. Real briefly, because I know we're about out of time, I just wanted to touch on a few of the federal resources that are available. So if you could advance to the next slide. I just wanted to highlight that if you are a tribal Alaska Native community, the Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation is still open. The due date for that proposal is February 24th. The other proposal that I wanted to highlight is the Second Chance Act, and that is specifically for reentry. And so that is something that tribal and Alaska Native communities are eligible to apply for as well. So as I said, these slides will be sent to you, and these should be hyperactive links to direct you straight to these solicitations so you can see them. Again, here's just some more solicitations to draw to your attention. And again, these can all be found at bja.gov/funding. These are just some other BJA resources, some publications, and some federal resources that I wanted to bring to your attention. And again, when you receive these PowerPoint handouts, these are hyperlinked that will direct you straight to these resources. These are some upcoming trainings from APPA specifically. We have a case management practices training for tribal probation personnel. This is a very skill-based training that focuses on motivational interviewing, engaging families in the supervision process, and case planning. And we do provide scholarships to assist with travel and lodging. So registration for that is currently open. We are going to be hosting a dialogue on enhanced sentencing authority implementation, and that is going to be June 16th through 18th in Tucson, Arizona. We are going to be bringing in some tribes that have already implemented enhanced sentencing authority and have them share and talk about their journey to implementation. That one is currently awaiting BJA approval. The other one we're hosting is interviewing and report writing training for tribal probation personnel. Again, this is a very skill-based training, so we only take 15 to 20 officers at a time. And again, we will provide scholarships for training or for travel and lodging for that event as well. That one is awaiting BJA approval as well. And then we also invite everyone to the APPA Annual Training Institute. We also have a Tribal Issues Committee that meets at each of the institutes. The next institute will be July 12th through 15th in Los Angeles. And I will be providing 5 scholarships for tribal probation officers. So if you're interested in getting on the notification list of when these trainings are happening and any scholarship or training assistance that's available, please feel free to email me your contact information and I'll be sure to get you on that distribution list. One thing that I wanted to bring your attention to is we now have a tribal resource repository that's available. This is a great website. It's kind of like a one-stop shop for developing or existing pretrial probation and reentry programs. You can access this website through the APPA website and click on the Resources tab, and it will be one of the options listed there. You can click on here and get access to templates of supervision forms, of existing policies and procedures for probation departments, access to publications. We post training announcements on there. We have technical assistance opportunities that you can apply straight from this website too. So I encourage you to check that out. Also, if you have examples of forms that you would like us to post on here and make available for other jurisdictions to access, please email those to me and we'll make sure that they get posted up here for you. And just real quick, we're just going to kind of scroll through these. These are just some publications that are available on the website that are, for free download. So I just wanted to make you aware of those. And then again, we have lots of training and technical assistance available related to community supervision with pretrial probation or reentry, the implementation of enhanced sentencing authority, alternatives to incarceration, or intergovernmental collaboration. So we want to thank you very much for participating in this webinar. Again, it has been recorded and will be available on the website in a few days. We will be emailing out all the PowerPoint materials so you have access to all this great information, and we'll have our contact information as well. Once we conclude this, you will be asked to complete a survey, and we do ask for your input and your honest comments on that. It's great for the presenters to get feedback and comments. And if you think of any questions that you have that you didn't ask during the webinar, please feel free to email us and we'll be sure to get back with you. Kathleen and Morgan are great about responding and sharing information and answering questions. So I encourage you to use them as a resource. So with that, we will conclude the webinar, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.